Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you'd like to submit a story, feel free to do so in the comments down below or on my email. Alright, now let's dive into today's story. Deep down, I had a feeling it would be a bad idea. It started as a stupid dare, like all bad decisions do. My best friend Logan found an old abandoned house on the outskirts of town. You know, the kind of place everyone swears is haunted, but no one actually goes near. The house had a reputation, not just for being creepy, but for what had happened there. Decades ago, a woman had been found dead inside. Her body was bruised and beaten, with stab wounds all over her face and body. But no evidence of a killer was ever found. No fingerprints, no signs of forced entry. Nothing. It was like the house had swallowed her whole. Naturally, the rumors spread, and the place became a local legend. Of course, Logan being Logan, thought it was the perfect setting for a challenge. He bet me $50 I wouldn't last a night there. Our friend Isabella thought it was hilarious and kept egging him on, saying I'd chicken out. "You know he's gonna bail the second he hears a creak," she said, laughing. "I give him 10 minutes. "You've got to send us pictures and videos," Logan added, smirking. "No proof, no money." I kept my real plan to myself. I wasn't going to stay the whole night. No way. I'd hang out for 2 hours, send them all the proof they wanted, and then get out of there with my $50. "Sure, sounds easy enough," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Logan grinned, clearly enjoying himself. "We'll see about that." Friday night rolled around, and before heading in, I texted Logan and Isabella in the group chat. "All right, I'm here," I typed, attaching a picture of the house. Its broken windows and sagging porch looked even worse in the dim glow of my car's headlights. "That place looks like it's gonna fall apart if you sneeze," Isabella replied. "Be careful." A moment later, she sent another message, this time with a photo of herself curled up on the couch with a blanket and a bowl of popcorn. Netflix was paused on her TV in the background. Meanwhile, I'm living the dream. "Don't worry, I've got this," I wrote back, trying to mask my nerves. Logan responded with a thumbs up emoji followed by, "Remember, we need proof. And don't fake it. We'll know." The air was colder than I expected, and the crunch of leaves underfoot echoed too loudly in the stillness of the night. The house loomed ahead, its dark silhouette against the moonlit sky sending a shiver down my spine. I pushed the creaky front door open and stepped inside. The smell hit me first, a mix of mildew, rot, and something faintly metallic. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating a narrow hallway with peeling wallpaper and warped floorboards. The air felt heavier inside, like the house was holding its breath. "Okay," I muttered to myself, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just get some pictures, maybe a video or two, and then I'm out." The first room I entered looked like it had been a living room. A few pieces of broken furniture were scattered across the floor, and the remains of a brick fireplace stood against one wall. The wallpaper here was in worse shape, hanging in long, curling strips that revealed the cracked plaster beneath. I took a few pictures and sent them to the group chat. "Looking cozy," Logan texted back almost immediately, followed by a laughing emoji. I rolled my eyes and moved on. The next room was a kitchen, though there wasn't much left of it. The cabinets were either missing or hanging off their hinges, and the sink was filled with a murky, stagnant puddle. A single chair sat in the middle of the room, its wood warped and splintered. I took another picture and sent it. "Looks like you've got a dinner date," Isabella texted. "Very funny," I muttered. As I explored further, I started to get the sense that the house wasn't just abandoned. It was forgotten. Dust coated everything, and the silence was so complete that even my breathing felt too loud. But nothing weird happened. No whispers, no footsteps, just the creaks and groans of an old house settling under its own weight. I made my way upstairs, careful to avoid the spots where the floorboards looked too weak to hold my weight. The second floor was mostly empty rooms, their walls marked with strange stains and graffiti. One room had a broken bed frame and an overturned dresser, and another was completely bare except for a single cracked mirror hanging on the wall. I paused in front of the mirror, shining my flashlight on it. The glass was so dirty I could barely make out my own reflection, but something about it made me uneasy. I snapped a picture and sent it to the group chat. "That's creepy," Isabella texted. "You should leave now." "Not yet," Logan replied. "He's got the whole night to prove it." I sighed and headed back downstairs. The agreement was the whole night, but I knew I wasn't staying that long. 2 hours. That's all I needed to last. Easy money, I told myself. Easy money. The house was quieter than I expected, but that didn't make it any less unsettling. Every step I took echoed through the halls, the sound bouncing off the peeling walls and faded wallpaper. I was starting to feel more comfortable, though. Maybe it wasn't so bad after all. It was just an old house. Dusty, empty, and forgotten. My flashlight beam swept across another hallway as I moved deeper into the house. There were old picture frames hanging crooked on the walls, their glass shattered and their contents faded into illegible shadows. Some of them had faces that were barely visible, warped and discolored with time. It felt as though the people in the photographs were watching me, their hollow eyes following my every move. I took another picture and sent it to the group chat. "Ooh, spooky," Logan texted back. "I bet you're laughing it up on your couch," I typed. "Some of us have real courage." "Courage or stupidity?" Isabella replied, adding a laughing emoji. "Just don't scream too loud. You might wake the ghosts." I smirked at the screen and slid my phone into my pocket, trying to focus. As I rounded a corner, the air felt colder. It wasn't like a draft. It was a sudden drop in temperature that made my breath puff out in a faint mist. I chalked it up to the house being ancient and poorly insulated. Still, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling crawling up my spine. That's when I heard it, a soft rhythmic tapping coming from one of the rooms ahead. I stopped in my tracks, my heart racing. The tapping was steady, deliberate, like someone was knocking on wood in slow, measured intervals. I shined my flashlight down the hallway, the beam flickering slightly as it landed on a closed door at the end. "Probably just an old pipe," I muttered to myself, though my voice sounded weak even to my own ears. My hands were shaking as I gripped the flashlight tighter and stepped toward the sound. The tapping grew louder as I approached. The door at the end of the hallway was slightly ajar, just enough to cast a shadow into the room beyond. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to turn around, but curiosity, and maybe a little pride, pushed me forward. Slowly I crept closer, each step feeling heavier than the last. I reached out, my hand trembling, and nudged the door open. The tapping stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was deafening, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. My flashlight flickered again, casting fleeting shadows on the cracked walls. Just as I was about to step back, the closet door in the corner burst open. "Boo!" I screamed and stumbled back, nearly dropping the flashlight. Logan burst out of the closet, laughing so hard he had to clutch his sides. "You should have seen your face," he managed between fits of laughter. "Priceless." "What the hell, man?" I shouted, my voice still shaky. "How long have you been here?" "About 20 minutes, he said, still grinning. "I figured you'd come this way eventually. Thought I'd make things a little more interesting." I groaned and shoved him lightly. "You're such an idiot. You nearly gave me a heart attack." Logan just laughed, clearly proud of himself. "Hey, someone had to make sure you didn't get too comfortable. A haunted house isn't supposed to be boring." I rolled my eyes but couldn't help smiling a little. "So, are you staying here now? Or are you just going to keep popping out of closets to scare me?" "Nah, I'm sticking around," he said, pulling a flashlight of his own from his backpack. "Let's see what else this place has to offer." With Logan by my side, the house felt a little less intimidating. We wandered through the halls, poking our heads into empty rooms and cracking jokes about the creepy decor. One room had a tattered rocking chair that swayed slightly in the breeze from a broken window. Logan joked about it being the ghost's favorite seat. Another room was filled with old books, their pages yellowed and curling at the edges. "Check this out," Logan said, pulling a particularly thick book off a dusty shelf. He flipped it open, but the pages crumbled in his hands. "Oops. Guess it's been a while since anyone checked this one out." We laughed, the sound echoing eerily in the empty house. The silence didn't seem as oppressive anymore, and I almost started to relax. Almost. As we continued exploring, Logan found a door leading to what looked like a basement. "Bet this is where they keep the ghosts," he joked, wiggling the doorknob. It creaked open to reveal a narrow staircase leading into pitch darkness. The faint smell of damp earth wafted up, and I hesitated, suddenly uneasy again. "You first," Logan said, grinning. "Very funny," I shot back. But he'd already started down the stairs, his flashlight cutting through the thick darkness below. I followed, my footsteps hesitant as the wood creaked ominously beneath me. The basement was colder, and the walls were lined with what looked like rusted shelves, old tools, and boxes that had started to disintegrate from the damp. "This place is straight out of a horror movie," Logan said, shining his flashlight on a dusty workbench. "I mean, look at this. All it's missing is the creepy music." Something shifted in the corner of the room, a faint sound like shuffling feet. Both of us froze, our flashlights snapping toward the noise. The light revealed nothing but a pile of old rags and debris. "Probably just a rat," I said. Logan laughed nervously. "Yeah, a rat, sure." We backed out of the basement quickly after that, neither of us willing to admit how spooked we were. "All right, maybe this house does have a little something going on," Logan said as we climbed the stairs. "But I'm still calling it. You're not going to last the whole night." I gave him a look, but deep down, I wasn't so sure anymore. Logan and I continued exploring the house, but the playful atmosphere was starting to wear thin. The deeper we went, the more oppressive the air felt, and the faint sense of unease crept back into my mind. Logan, of course, was still cracking jokes, but his laughter sounded a little forced now. "What's that smell?" I muttered, wrinkling my nose. A faint but unmistakable stench was beginning to creep through the air. It wasn't the usual musty, old house smell. It was sharper, almost metallic, with an undercurrent of rot. "Yeah, I smell it too," Logan said, his voice quieter than before. He shined his flashlight around the room we'd just entered. It looked like it had once been a dining room. A broken chandelier hung from the ceiling, its crystals scattered across the floor, and a long decayed table sat in the center of the room. Chairs were tipped over and rotting, their fabric eaten away by time and who knows what else. The smell grew stronger as we moved toward the far end of the room. Logan covered his nose with his sleeve. "Whatever it is, it's disgusting." I nodded, my eyes scanning for the source. My flashlight landed on a door at the back of the room. The paint was peeling, and something dark stained the wood near the bottom. "I think it's coming from there." "Great," Logan said sarcastically. "Let's open the creepy door. That always works out well." Despite his words, he followed as I approached the door. My hand hovered over the knob, hesitating. The smell was almost overwhelming now, making my stomach churn. "Ready?" "Nope," Logan said, but he nodded anyway. I turned the knob slowly and the door creaked open. The smell hit us like a wall. I gagged, stumbling back, while Logan cursed under his breath. The room beyond was small and windowless, lit only by our flashlights. The floor was covered in a thick layer of dust, but it wasn't enough to hide the dark stains that spread across the floorboards. In the center of the room was a pile of something. At first I couldn't make sense of it. It looked like old rags, maybe? But as I stepped closer, the shapes became clearer. Bones. Small ones. Some broken, tangled with scraps of fabric and hair. "Oh, hell no," Logan said, backing out of the room. "What even is this?" I didn't answer. My throat felt tight, and my flashlight wavered as I stared at the pile. It didn't look human. At least I didn't think so. But the smell and the way the bones were scattered, like something had torn them apart. It was all wrong. "Let's get out of here," Logan said, his voice tense. "Yeah," I whispered, finally tearing my eyes away. We both backed out of the room and closed the door behind us, neither of us wanting to look at it anymore. The smell lingered in the air, clinging to our clothes and making my stomach churn. We made our way back toward the main hall, but the silence in the house was heavier now. It pressed down on us, turning every creak of the floorboards into a deafening noise. Logan kept glancing over his shoulder, and I couldn't blame him. The feeling of being watched was stronger than ever. "This place is seriously messed up," Logan muttered. "Why did I even suggest this?" "Because you thought it'd be fun," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "How's that working out for you?" "Not great," he admitted. "You?" "Same." We shared a nervous laugh, but it didn't do much to ease the tension. The house felt alive around us, its shadows deeper and darker than they should have been. My flashlight beam didn't seem to reach as far, and every flicker of movement at the edge of my vision made my pulse race. "Let's just check out one more room and call it," Logan said, stopping in front of a closed door. "We can say we explored the whole place." I hesitated, but nodded. "Fine. One more room." The door creaked loudly as Logan pushed it open, and we stepped into what looked like a study. The walls were lined with bookshelves, though most of the books had crumbled into piles of dust. A massive desk sat in the center of the room, its surface covered in papers that had long since yellowed and curled at the edges. "This is less creepy," Logan said, shining his flashlight over the room. "Almost normal." I nodded, stepping closer to the desk. The papers were covered in faded writing, but I couldn't make out much of it. One of them had a sketch of the house, with strange symbols drawn in the margins. I took a picture and sent it to the group chat. "You think Isabella's still awake?" Logan asked, checking his phone. "Probably," I said. "She's probably laughing at us right now." Logan snorted. "Yeah, well, I don't blame her." We lingered in the study for a few more minutes, the relative calm of the room giving us a brief reprieve from the unease that had been gnawing at us all night. But the smell from earlier seemed to creep back in, faint but unmistakable, and we both decided it was time to leave. As we stepped back into the hallway, I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was waiting for something, watching, and whatever it wasn't finished with us yet. Logan and I continued making our way through the house, the uneasy silence settling over us like a heavy blanket. The creaking floorboards beneath our feet seemed louder now, every step echoing through the emptiness. The smell we'd encountered earlier still lingered faintly, clinging to our clothes and filling the air with a sickly undertone. "I think we're done," I said, my voice quieter than before. "We've seen enough, right?" Logan hesitated, his flashlight beam flicking toward a nearby door. "One more room. I promise. Then we're out." I sighed, reluctant but unwilling to back down. "Fine. One more." The door creaked loudly as Logan pushed it open, revealing what looked like an old bedroom. The bed frame was still intact, though the mattress had long since rotted away. The walls were covered in faded floral wallpaper, peeling in long strips to reveal cracked plaster beneath. A window on the far wall let in a faint glow from the moonlight, casting long shadows across the room. As I stepped inside, the air felt colder, heavier. My flashlight beam swept across the room, lingering on a faded portrait hanging on the wall. The glass was cracked, but the image was still visible, a somber-looking woman in a dark dress, her eyes staring directly at the viewer. Something about her expression made my stomach twist. Logan's voice broke the silence. "You hear that?" I froze, my flashlight trembling as I turned to him. "Hear what?" He didn't answer right away, his own flashlight darting across the room. The faint sound of creaking wood echoed from the hallway behind us, slow and deliberate like footsteps. My pulse quickened. "It's probably just the house settling," I whispered, though my voice betrayed my nerves. "Yeah, or something else," Logan muttered, his tone half joking but edged with tension. The creaking grew louder, closer. I gripped my flashlight tighter, my eyes locked on the doorway. My mind raced, imagining some figure stepping out of the darkness. A shadow shifted just beyond the doorway, and my breath caught in my throat. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaky. The sound echoed faintly, swallowed by the oppressive silence. Suddenly, something darted into the room, letting out a loud scream. I yelled, stumbling back and nearly dropping my flashlight. My heart raced as my beam flickered wildly, illuminating the figure that had just burst in. It was Isabella. She doubled over in laughter, clutching her sides as Logan leaned against the wall, his own laughter joining hers. "Gotcha," Isabella said between gasps for air. Her grin was wide and smug, and she looked completely pleased with herself. "What the hell?" I shouted, my voice shaky. "How are you here? You were supposed to be at home." Logan finally composed himself, wiping tears of laughter from his eyes. She got you good, man. You sent a picture of yourself watching Netflix, I said, pointing at Isabella. How did you even... Pre-made photo, Isabella said with a shrug. I sent it so you wouldn't expect me to come out after Logan scared you. I glared at both of them, my pulse still pounding. So this whole thing was planned? Pretty much, Logan admitted, grinning. She got here while you were busy freaking out in the dining room. We figured we'd give you a double dose of terror. You guys are the worst, I muttered, my voice a mix of annoyance and relief. I leaned against the bed frame, trying to calm my nerves. How long have you been hiding here, Isabella? She smirked. Long enough. I was in that closet over there for at least 15 minutes, trying not to laugh when I heard you and Logan freaking out about the smell. Unbelievable, I muttered. You're lucky I didn't drop the flashlight and break something. Come on, admit it, Isabella said, crossing her arms. It was a good prank. I rolled my eyes but couldn't help smiling a little. Fine, you got me. But if either of you scares me again, I'm out of here. Deal, Logan said, still chuckling. Now that we're all here, let's check out the rest of the place. Who knows? Maybe there's an actual ghost waiting to say hi. Not funny, I shot back, but I followed them as we moved deeper into the house. The tension had eased somewhat, but the oppressive atmosphere of the house remained, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't as alone as we thought. The shadows seemed to press in closer, and every sound, even the ones we made, seemed magnified in the silence. As we walked down another hallway, Isabella suddenly stopped. Did you hear that? Not this again, I said, but I couldn't ignore the prickling sensation on the back of my neck. The sound of faint creaking echoed again, followed by what could have been a whisper. We all froze, our flashlights scanning the hallway. All right, Logan said nervously. If this is another prank, just say so. Isabella didn't respond immediately, her eyes narrowing as she stared into the shadows. I didn't do that, she said quietly. The oppressive silence stretched on, broken only by our breathing. Finally, Logan let out a nervous laugh. All right, you've had your scare. Let's keep going, he said, trying to sound braver than he looked. I nodded reluctantly, the unease still coiling in my gut. Isabella smirked, shining her flashlight down the hallway. Come on, scaredy cat. There's more to see. I hesitated for a moment before following them deeper into the house, unable to shake the feeling that something unseen was following us, hidden in the shifting shadows just beyond the reach of our lights. We moved further into the house, the air seeming to grow colder with every step. Logan and Isabella led the way, their flashlights cutting through the thick shadows that pooled in every corner. Despite the oppressive atmosphere of the house, the tension from earlier had eased, replaced with a strange excitement. The hallway stretched on longer than it should have, lined with doors that seemed to loom over us. Some were closed, others ajar, revealing glimpses of darkened rooms that felt untouched for decades. The faint creaks of the old wood beneath our feet seemed louder now, but it didn't feel threatening. It felt like the house was waiting for us to discover its secrets. This place is a maze, Isabella said, her voice filled with curiosity. How big is this house? Too big, I replied, shining my flashlight toward a door at the end of the hallway. Unlike the others, it was slightly ajar, revealing the faintest hint of a room beyond. Want to check it out? Logan asked, a grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. His tone held a mix of nervousness and excitement, like a kid about to open a mystery box. "Do we have a choice?" Isabella shot back, rolling her eyes but clearly intrigued. Logan shrugged and stepped forward. I followed, my unease fading as the promise of uncovering something interesting took over. Isabella brought up the rear, her flashlight darting behind us every now and then. The room at the end of the hallway turned out to be some sort of study. The walls were lined with bookshelves, their contents long since decayed. Most of the books had crumbled into unrecognizable heaps, but a few still clung stubbornly to the shelves, their spines warped with age. In the center of the room stood a desk, its surface covered in papers yellowed with time. A broken chair sat behind it, its upholstery torn and spilling its stuffing like entrails. "This is kind of cool," Logan said, stepping toward the desk. He picked up one of the papers, squinting at the faded writing. "Looks like letters or something." "Can you read it?" Isabella asked, leaning over his shoulder. Logan shook his head. "Not really. The ink's too faded." As they examined the desk, I wandered toward one of the bookshelves, drawn by a particular book whose title was still barely legible. The faint gold lettering on the spine read, "Journal." I pulled it off the shelf carefully, wincing as dust cascaded onto my hands. Flipping through the brittle pages, I found that most of them were blank or filled with writing too faint to decipher. But near the middle, a page stood out. The writing was larger, darker, as though the author had pressed the pen harder in a moment of urgency. "I can hear it now," I read aloud, my voice breaking the silence. Logan and Isabella looked up from the desk. "It whispers to me, even when I'm alone." "That's wild," Logan said, grinning. "Keep going." "There's more," I said, turning the page. It says, "I thought I could leave, but Amelia won't let me. The house won't let me." Logan let out a low whistle, clearly intrigued. "Who's Amelia?" "No idea," I said, closing the journal and placing it back on the shelf. "But it feels like there's a story here." "Exactly," Isabella said, her eyes bright with curiosity. "This house has history. Creepy, sure, but also fascinating." We stepped back into the hallway, and though the silence was heavy, it wasn't unnerving. It felt like the house was daring us to keep going, to uncover more of its secrets. The air was colder, and faint wisps of mist appeared as we spoke, but it only added to the thrill. "Did it get darker?" Isabella asked, shining her flashlight around. The beam seemed weaker, barely piercing the shadows. "Probably just the old wiring messing with our lights," Logan said with a shrug. "Let's see what else this place has to offer." As we walked, the house seemed to grow more intriguing. The walls felt narrower, the ceilings lower, but it felt more like the house was guiding us rather than trapping us. The floorboards creaked under our weight, each sound echoing like a secret waiting to be uncovered. "This place is insane," Logan said, glancing over his shoulder. "Whoever lived here must have been seriously weird." "You're just imagining things," Isabella said, though her tone was light. "We haven't even scratched the surface yet." We rounded a corner and stopped. The hallway ahead of us was lined with mirrors. They were old and warped, their silvered surfaces tarnished with age. My flashlight beam bounced off them, creating strange reflections that seemed to shimmer unnaturally. "Okay, that's a little creepy," Isabella admitted, stepping closer to one of the mirrors. She tilted her head, studying her distorted reflection. "It's like a funhouse mirror, but worse. Let's keep moving, Logan said, though he couldn't hide his grin. These mirrors are probably worth something if we ever decide to play antique dealers. As we moved past the mirrors, I couldn't help but glance at my reflection. It seemed distorted, wrong. My face looked pale, my eyes too wide, like the reflection was someone else wearing my face. I shuddered and looked away, focusing on the path ahead. "Don't look too hard," Isabella said, her voice teasing but soft. "You might not like what you see." None of us spoke as we moved through the hallway, the mirrors stretching on longer than they should have. Finally, we reached the end, where a single door waited for us. Without a word, Logan opened it, and we stepped through into another part of the house. The air felt colder here, the silence heavier, but instead of fear, we felt anticipation. It was like the house was offering us its secrets, daring us to learn more about the things that had happened within its walls, and we weren't ready to stop. The next part of the house was darker, the shadows pooling in corners and stretching across the floor in unnatural shapes. The air was cooler now, and the faint sound of creaking wood echoed around us, as if the house were alive and shifting. Despite the strange atmosphere, we were more intrigued than unsettled, eager to see what the house had hidden away. Logan stopped in the middle of the hallway and turned to face us, his flashlight casting strange, bouncing shadows on the walls. "All right, I have a suggestion," he said. His tone carried a mix of excitement and determination. "Oh no," Isabella said immediately, crossing her arms. "I already don't like where this is going." "Come on," Logan said, gesturing around. "We've been sticking together, but this place is huge. If we want to really see what's here, we should split up." I blinked at him, unsure if he was serious. "You've seen a horror movie before, right? That's how people get killed." "Yeah, but we're not in a horror movie," Logan countered. "It's just an old house. If we split up, we can cover more ground faster. Besides, we'll keep in touch through the group chat." Isabella gave him a long look, her expression skeptical, but her hesitation seemed forced, like she was playing a part in a script. "This has bad idea written all over it," she said, her tone flat. "Bad ideas are kind of the theme tonight," I said, giving her a half smile. "What do you think?" She sighed, glancing down the hallway. "Fine, but we're staying in touch, and if anything weird happens, we regroup." "Deal," Logan said, already moving toward a door on the left. "I'll take this side." "I'll go right," Isabella muttered, shooting him a look that clearly conveyed her lingering doubts. "Guess that leaves me with straight ahead," I said, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling in my chest. We each chose a direction, and within moments, the silence of the house swallowed the sound of their footsteps. I walked slowly, my flashlight beam cutting through the heavy darkness ahead of me. The hallway stretched on endlessly, each door looking identical to the last. I stopped in front of one that was slightly ajar, the faintest sliver of light coming from the room beyond. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open. The room was sparse, with nothing but a table in the center and a few chairs scattered around it. Dust coated every surface, disturbed only by faint trails that looked like they'd been made recently. On the table was a stack of yellowed papers, curling at the edges from age. I picked one up carefully, squinting at the faded writing. It looked like a journal entry. Most of the text was too faded to read, but a single sentence stood out, written in large, bold letters. It read, "She's always here." A chill ran down my spine, but I couldn't tell if it was fear or excitement. I snapped a photo of the paper and sent it to the group chat. Found something interesting, I typed. My phone buzzed, and it was Logan's reply. Wow, dude, he wrote. That's creepy. Isabella chimed in moments later. Creepy, she added, short and to the point. The air in the room felt heavier as I left, my steps echoing louder than they should have in the hallway. The floorboards creaked with a rhythm that felt almost purposeful, as though someone, or something, was mimicking my steps. My grip tightened on the flashlight as I tried to push the thoughts out of my mind. A sudden crash echoed from somewhere deeper in the house, freezing me in place. My flashlight beam darted around, searching for the source of the noise, but there was nothing. I followed the noise to a nearby room, the door slightly ajar. The crash had definitely come from here. Taking a deep breath, I nudged the door open. The room was empty, save for a shattered vase lying in shards on the floor. The arrangement felt staged, almost too perfect, as if placed there deliberately. A faint breeze stirred the dust, though there were no windows to explain it. My phone buzzed again. Be careful, Isabella wrote. As I turned to leave, a faint sound reached my ears. A whisper, too soft to make out. I froze, shining my flashlight around the room. But nothing moved. My heart pounded in my chest as I backed into the hallway, gripping the flashlight tighter. The house felt different now, as though it had shifted subtly while I wasn't paying attention. The air seemed heavier, the shadows thicker, almost alive. My footsteps echoed too loudly as I wandered further into the endless maze of halls and rooms. I hadn't seen Logan or Isabella in what felt like ages, but I reassured myself that they were just a few turns away. Then I heard it. A soft, muffled sobbing. I froze, my flashlight trembling in my hand. It was faint at first, barely audible over the creaking floorboards and my own breathing. But as I strained to listen, the sound grew clearer. A woman crying. It was coming from somewhere up ahead. Isabella? I called out, my voice wavering slightly. There was no response. My stomach twisted with unease, but I forced myself to move forward. Isabella, are you okay? The sobbing continued, steady and haunting, drawing me further into the house. I quickened my pace, my shoes crunching on the dust-coated floor. The sound seemed to echo all around me, making it impossible to pinpoint its exact location. I stopped and called out again, louder this time. Logan, Isabella, where are you? Silence. My heart pounded as I realized they weren't answering. I fumbled for my phone, but before I could check the group chat, the sobbing grew louder, cutting through the stillness like a knife. It was close now, just behind a door at the end of the hallway. The door was cracked open slightly, just enough to let the sound slip through. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorknob. Something about the cry had changed. It was subtle at first, but the more I listened, the more it sounded wrong. The sobbing wasn't filled with grief anymore. It was filled with something else. A sick, unnatural glee. It wasn't crying. It was laughter. The sound sent chills down my spine. The laughter was faint at first, almost playful, but it quickly grew louder and more guttural, turning into a grotesque cackle that echoed unnaturally in the confined space of the hallway. My instincts screamed at me to run, to get as far away from that door as possible, but my legs felt rooted to the spot. The laughter stopped abruptly, plunging the hallway into an oppressive silence. My heart was racing so fast it felt like it might burst. Summoning what little courage I had, I pushed the door open with trembling hands. The room beyond was shrouded in shadows, my flashlight barely piercing the darkness. The air inside was colder, sharp with a faint metallic scent that made me gag. At first, I thought the room was empty, but then I saw her. She was standing in the far corner, facing the wall. Her hair was long and tangled, hanging down her back like a curtain. Her dress was tattered, the fabric stained with something dark that made my stomach churn. She didn't move. The stillness of her figure was unnerving, as though she wasn't alive. I took a shaky step forward, my flashlight flickering slightly. "Isabella?" I whispered, though I knew it couldn't be her. The figure in the corner remained motionless. And then, as if hearing her name, she began to turn. Her movements were slow and almost mechanical. My breath caught in my throat as her face came into view. It was the woman from the picture. The hollow eyes, the gaunt cheeks, the pale, cracked skin. Her face was deeply lined with terrible, unnatural forehead wrinkles that seemed to split her skin like cracks in dry earth. Her lips stretched into a grotesque, too-wide smile, revealing jagged teeth stained dark. Blood, or maybe drool, spilled from the corners of her mouth, dripping slowly down her chin. I stepped back as she began to move toward me, each step deliberate and slow. Her hollow eyes never left mine, and with every step closer, the air around me grew colder. My flashlight flickered, and in the brief flashes of light, I saw more of her. Her bony hands outstretched, her long nails cracked and jagged. She was only a few steps away when it happened. From the shadows behind her, a hand shot out, grabbing her by the hair. The woman let out a sharp, guttural scream as she was yanked backward, her body twisting unnaturally as she landed on the floor with a sickening thud. I froze, unable to process what I was seeing. A figure stepped into the light, its movements quick and violent. In its hand was a long, glinting knife. Without hesitation, it plunged the blade into the woman's face, the sound of the impact wet and horrifying. She writhed on the floor, her laughter turning into a distorted wail as the figure stabbed her again and again, in the chest, the stomach, the throat. Blood pooled around her, dark and thick, the metallic scent filling the room. As if that wasn't enough, the figure dropped the knife and reached for a nearby brick, lifting it high above its head. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. The figure brought the brick down on her face with a sickening crunch, then again and again, each impact sending splatters of blood and gore across the floor. The wailing stopped, and the room fell into a chilling silence, broken only by the sound of my own ragged breathing. I didn't wait to see what the figure would do next. My survival instincts kicked in, and I turned and bolted, my flashlight jerking wildly as I stumbled out of the room. My foot caught on something, and I nearly fell, crashing into the wall as I careened down the hallway. I passed a dining table, its long surface covered in dust and shattered plates. I didn't look back. I couldn't. "Logan! Isabella!" I screamed, but the words felt empty, swallowed by the house. No one answered. The silence was broken only by the faint echo of my own voice. I knew I couldn't stay there forever. I crouched behind the old wardrobe, my breathing ragged as I struggled to piece my thoughts together. The image of that woman, her gaunt, horrifying face and that awful, too wide smile was burned into my mind. The oppressive silence of the house felt heavier now, almost as if it was waiting for me to make my next move. My phone buzzed in my pocket, breaking the silence. I fumbled for it, my fingers trembling as I unlocked the screen. A message from Logan popped up in the group chat. Logan said, "You good, dude? What's going on over there?" I froze, staring at the words. Something about them felt wrong. My stomach twisted as I typed back a hurried response. I said, "What do you mean? Where are you?" The reply came almost instantly. "At home. Why?" A cold wave of dread washed over me. My hands shook as I stared at the message. No, that didn't make sense. Logan was here, in the house. I had been with him and Isabella this entire time. Before I could process it, Isabella's message appeared. "Yeah, what's going on? We've been texting you. Are you okay?" I felt my chest tighten as I reread their messages. "They're at home? That's not possible." I had seen them, spoken to them. My pulse thundered in my ears as I typed back, "Stop messing with me. You were both here. We split up to explore." The 3 dots indicating a reply appeared, then vanished. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before Logan responded. "What are you talking about? We're at home. We never went with you." I stared at the screen, my mind racing. They were lying. They had to be. I was about to reply when Isabella sent another message. "Are you joking? You said you were going alone. We've been home all night." I dropped the phone. My hands felt numb as the realization sank in. If Logan and Isabella were at home, then who had been with me in the house? My breath came in shallow gasps as I replayed the night in my head, every interaction with them, or whoever they were, taking on a sinister new meaning. I grabbed my phone off the floor, typing furiously, "This isn't funny. Who the hell is in here with me?" The reply came almost immediately. "What do you mean? You're alone, right?" My stomach dropped. Alone? I wasn't alone. The memories of their voices, their laughter, Logan's playful teasing, it all felt real. Too real. But now, under the weight of the silence and the oppressive darkness, doubt began to creep in. Were they ever really here? Desperate to confirm what I was seeing, I decided to FaceTime them. My hands trembled as I pressed the video call button in the group chat, my heart pounding with every passing second. After a few tense moments, the screen flickered to life. Logan's face appeared, his expression one of confusion and concern. "Dude, what's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost." Behind him, I could see a couch and the faint glow of a television. It was his living room. Isabella's voice chimed in as she adjusted her phone to join the call. She was wrapped in a blanket, a bowl of popcorn resting on her lap. "Why do you look so freaked out?" Isabella asked, leaning closer to the camera. "What's happening?" I stammered, unable to contain the panic in my voice. "You're supposed to be here. I saw you both. We split up to explore the house." They exchanged a confused glance before Logan spoke. "We're not there, man. We're at home. You told us you were going alone." "No!" I shouted, my voice cracking. "You were here. I saw you. Logan, you even scared me in the dining room." Isabella's brows furrowed. "We've been here the whole time. Are you messing with us?" The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. "If you're not here," I whispered, my voice trembling, "then who is?" My flashlight flickered, casting erratic beams across the room. The oppressive silence of the house seemed to press in closer, the shadows stretching and twisting at the edges of my vision. I clutched the phone tightly, my hands slick with sweat. "Logan! Isabella!" I screamed into the darkness, my voice cracking. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was raw panic. The house swallowed my voice, offering nothing in return. For a moment, I thought I heard footsteps, but they didn't belong to Logan or Isabella. They were heavy, deliberate, and they stopped just outside the door. My phone buzzed again, a message from Isabella. "Get out of there. Now." The words sent a jolt of terror through me. I scrambled to my feet, my back pressed against the wardrobe as I tried to steady my breathing. The silence outside the door was deafening. I didn't dare move. My flashlight flickered again, and for a brief moment, the room was plunged into total darkness. When the light returned, the door creaked open slightly. Just a crack, enough for the shadows in the hallway to spill into the room like black ink. My heart pounded as I stared at the gap, waiting for something to appear. My phone buzzed again, but I didn't dare take my eyes off the door. "What's happening?" "Talk to us," texted Logan. My fingers fumbled over the screen as I typed, my breathing shallow. The door, it just opened. Someone's out there. The dots appeared again, and my stomach churned as I waited for the reply. The house felt like it was holding its breath. I sat in silence for what felt like an eternity, the oppressive atmosphere of the house weighing down on me. My thoughts churned, the realization from the FaceTime call replaying over and over in my mind. Logan and Isabella were at home. They had been at home the whole time. I wasn't alone in this house, and whoever was here with me wasn't them. The room around me felt alive, the air thick with an oppressive energy that seemed to pulse in time with my frantic heartbeat. Every sound, the faint creaks of the house settling, my own ragged breathing, seemed amplified, as if the house itself was aware of my fear. I clutched my flashlight tightly, its weak beam trembling against the shadowed walls. The silence was deafening, a suffocating void that seemed to press in closer with each passing second. I couldn't stay here. I had to move. Summoning every ounce of courage I had, I pushed myself to my feet and bolted. My legs carried me down the hallway, past the door I had barricaded behind me. The floorboards groaned under my weight as I sprinted, the beam of my flashlight bouncing wildly with each step. The air grew colder as I ran, biting against my skin and making it harder to breathe. Each shadow I passed seemed to reach out, clinging to the edges of my vision, making me feel as though I was being followed. As I rounded a corner, my flashlight caught the edge of a long dining table. Its surface was covered in a thick layer of dust, the once polished wood now dull and scarred. Plates and utensils were scattered haphazardly, some shattered and others coated in grime. I barely registered it at first, my focus entirely on finding a way out. But something, a shadow or movement, made me glance back, just for a second. Sitting at the table were two figures. I almost stopped, but my instincts screamed at me to keep going. My flashlight caught just enough detail to sear the image into my mind. A man and a woman, sitting side by side. Their postures were unnervingly still, their heads slightly tilted as if they were watching me. Even in the brief glance, I could see their resemblance to Logan and Isabella. The man's build, the woman's hair. It was uncanny. But it wasn't them. It couldn't be. Their stillness was wrong. They didn't move, didn't flinch as I ran past. It was as if they were frozen in time, waiting for me to look closer. Their presence sent a chill down my spine, a sickening realization that whatever they were, they weren't human. My breath hitched and I forced my legs to move faster, the heavy thuds of my footsteps echoing through the hall. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic rhythm that matched the chaos in my mind. The hallway stretched on endlessly, the walls seeming to close in around me with each step. Each turn revealed more shadowed corridors that led to nowhere. The memory of their stillness lingered like a weight on my back, and I couldn't shake the feeling that their eyes were following me. My flashlight flickered again, plunging me into brief moments of total darkness. Every time the light returned, I half expected to see them standing in front of me. A faint noise, a creak or a whisper, echoed from behind me, and I bit back a scream. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it sent my fear into overdrive. My legs burned as I pushed myself harder, my breaths coming in short, ragged gasps. The hallways felt alive, shifting and twisting with each frantic step. I didn't dare look back. The weight of their presence pressed against me, invisible but suffocating. Finally, I saw the front door. The sight of it sent a surge of hope through my chest. I sprinted faster, my body screaming in protest as I reached for the handle. My fingers closed around the cold metal, and I yanked the door open with every ounce of strength I had. The night air hit me like a wave, sharp and cold but wonderfully real. I didn't stop running. My feet pounded against the gravel path as I sprinted away from the house, my breaths ragged and my vision blurred with tears. The oppressive weight of the house lifted with every step, but the memory of those figures stayed with me, etched into my mind. I didn't dare look back. The thought of seeing the house again, of seeing them standing in the doorway, was too much to bear. The distant hum of a car engine snapped me out of my haze. I stumbled to the side of the road, collapsing onto the grass. My body ached, my lungs burned, but I didn't care. I was outside. I was alive. As I lay there staring up at the night sky, the events of the night played over and over in my mind. Logan and Isabella's voices from the FaceTime call echoed in my ears, and the image of those figures at the dining table refused to fade. And then there was the woman. Her hollow eyes, her grotesque smile, and the blood dripping from her mouth were etched into my mind as vividly as the moment I saw her. I couldn't forget how she was dragged into the shadows, how the knife plunged into her face and body, and how the brick smashed her skull until there was nothing left but silence. I didn't know what was in that house, and I wasn't sure I wanted to find out. But one thing was certain. I wasn't going back. The drive back to my house was a blur. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, my thoughts racing in circles as I replayed everything I had just experienced. The house, the figures, the call with Logan and Isabella. It all felt like a fever dream. But the ache in my legs and the pounding in my chest told me it was all too real. I barely remembered parking the car or stumbling into my house. The lights inside felt too bright, too harsh after the suffocating darkness of that place. I collapsed onto the couch, clutching my phone like a lifeline. My fingers hovered over the screen as I debated calling Logan and Isabella again. Instead, I sent a simple message. I texted, "Come over. Now." Their replies came quickly. Logan texted, "Be there in 10." Isabella texted, "On my way." The minutes stretched on like hours as I waited for them. I paced the living room, glancing at the windows every few seconds, half expecting to see something staring back at me from the darkness outside. The adrenaline that had carried me this far was fading, leaving behind a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. But I couldn't rest. Not yet. When the knock finally came at the door, I jumped. My heart raced as I peeked through the peephole, relief flooding me at the sight of Logan and Isabella standing on the porch. I swung the door open, and they stepped inside, their expressions a mix of concern and confusion. "What the hell happened?" Logan asked, his tone sharp but laced with worry. He looked me up and down, probably taking in my disheveled state. Isabella set her bag on the floor, her brow furrowed. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I laughed bitterly, the sound hollow and humorless. "I think I did." We sat in the living room, the warm glow of the lamps doing little to chase away the chill that seemed to cling to me. I told them everything. The bet, the house, the figures at the dining table. I described how I had even spoken to who I thought were them, and how they seemed normal, joking, teasing, and even pulling pranks on me. Logan had jumped out of a closet to scare me, and Isabella had appeared out of nowhere, laughing as if they'd planned the whole thing. And then there was the woman. At the time, it all felt real, too real. But now I knew it wasn't them. I left nothing out. Their faces grew more serious with every word, their earlier skepticism melting away as they realized I wasn't joking. "Wait," Isabella said, holding up a hand. "You're saying you saw us? Or people who looked like us?" "Exactly like you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. It was uncanny. But they weren't moving. They just sat there. Logan ran a hand through his hair, his jaw tight. "That doesn't make any sense. We were here the whole time." "I know," I snapped, my frustration bubbling over. "That's what makes it so messed up. I don't know who or what they were, but they weren't you." Isabella shivered, pulling her sweater tighter around her shoulders. "What about the woman you mentioned? The one you saw in the corner?" Her image flashed through my mind. The hollow eyes, the too wide smile, the blood spilling from her mouth. I swallowed hard, my stomach twisting. She didn't say anything. She just stared at me, like she was waiting for something. And then, out of the shadows, someone grabbed her by the hair and pulled her back. She screamed, and the next thing I knew, they were stabbing her, over and over again, in the face, the chest, everywhere. There was so much blood. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, as they picked up a brick and smashed her face until she stopped moving. That's when I ran. The room fell silent. The weight of my words hung in the air, heavy and oppressive. Logan leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. Isabella stared at the floor, her lips pressed into a thin line. Finally, Logan spoke. "So what do we do?" I shook my head. "Nothing. I'm not going back there. We need to figure out what that place is," Isabella said, her voice firm despite the fear in her eyes. "If there's something dangerous there, someone else might get hurt." "Let someone else deal with it," I muttered, leaning forward and burying my face in my hands. I barely got out alive. The conversation dwindled after that, the three of us sitting in uneasy silence. The warmth of my house felt foreign, almost suffocating after the events of the night. As I glanced out the window, the darkness outside seemed deeper than usual, the shadows thicker. One thing was certain. Whatever was in that house, it wasn't done with me yet. That same night, as the three of us sat in my living room, the weight of what had happened pressed down on us. None of us could stay silent for long. "We need to tell someone," Isabella said, breaking the tense quiet. "If someone got hurt in that house, the police need to know." I hesitated. What if they think we're crazy? What if they blame us? "We're not crazy," Logan said firmly, "and we didn't do anything wrong." After some back and forth, we agreed to call the police. Logan dialed the local department while Isabella and I sat in uneasy silence. When I finished explaining what I saw, the officer on the other end assured us they'd send someone to investigate. "We'll take it from here," the officer said. "Stay by your phones in case we have questions." We waited anxiously, none of us able to sit still for long. The minutes stretched into hours as the tension in the room grew unbearable. Every noise outside made me flinch. Every creak of the house made my stomach churn. Finally, my phone buzzed, and I snatched it up. I walked into the kitchen to take the call, the bright overhead light feeling oddly out of place. The officer's voice was calm but direct. "We've conducted a thorough search of the property. We did find something," the officer began, and my stomach tightened. 2 bodies, a man and a woman. Both appear to have been dead for hours, with multiple stab wounds on their faces and bodies. My heart thudded painfully in my chest. "What?" I whispered. "We recovered IDs near the bodies," the officer continued, his tone grim. "The names matched Logan Carter and Isabella Cruz." I froze, the air leaving my lungs. "That's not possible," I stammered. They're here. They're in my house right now." The officer paused. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice edged with concern. My hands trembled as I glanced toward the living room. From where I stood, I could see Logan and Isabella sitting on the couch. They weren't saying anything. They weren't moving. They were just sitting there. Their heads were slightly tilted, their eyes locked on the TV screen in the same unnervingly still way I'd seen the figures at the dining table. "Hello?" The officer's voice broke through the silence, but I couldn't respond. My phone slipped from my hand, clattering onto the floor. The sound didn't faze them. They didn't flinch. They didn't turn to look at me. They just stared at the TV, unmoving, as if nothing had happened. And in that moment, I realized the horrifying truth. They weren't Logan and Isabella. The house hadn't just followed me home. It brought them with it.